how one of the couple's dogs may have died.
We do. Officials believe that he most likely died of dehydration and starvation. The Australian Kelpie mix named Xena was found near Betsy's body in a crate. Now, the couple's...
I have an absolutely wild story that feels like it jumped straight out of a Hollywood mystery. We're talking about the bizarre circumstances around the reported passing of legendary actor Gene Hackman and his wife Betsy at their Santa Fe home in New Mexico. At first glance, you might think this is just a sad story of two elderly people who passed away at the same time, but the deeper you dig, the stranger it all gets. Let's start with what we know so far.
Now, the couple's two other dogs were found alive. It appears that they had access to a doggy door.
Authorities conducted a welfare check after neighbors said they hadn't heard from or seen the couple in days. By the time police entered the home, they discovered a deeply disturbing scene. Both Gene, who was 95 years old, and Betsy were found dead, and so was one of their 3 dogs. The other 2 dogs somehow managed to survive, but we still have no idea how that's even possible, especially if there was some kind of leak or toxic fumes in the air. It raises major questions, right? One initial theory floating around.
Let's move on to February 11th, 2025. Mrs. Arakawa had an email conversation with her massage therapist at about 11:21 a.m.
Championed by Gene's daughter Leslie is that carbon monoxide poisoning is to blame for both of her parents' deaths. However, law enforcement officials have gone on record to say they found absolutely no sign of carbon monoxide in the home. They actually tested extensively for any possible leaks, and those tests all came back negative. Plus, the local gas company confirmed there was no problem with the lines. So right away, the big question is,
a very rare disease transmitted through rodent feces, urine, or saliva about a week before her husband died.
If it wasn't carbon monoxide, what happened in that house? Now, Leslie, who has offered this carbon monoxide theory, has also said she refuses to travel to New Mexico until the police wrap up their investigation. She has not visited the home, hasn't personally gone to confirm anything, and hasn't seen her father's or Betsy's bodies. That is definitely curious behavior, right? Typically, when you lose a parent, you rush to be there immediately to identify the body, handle personal belongings, or at least pay respects.
We know from our investigation that on February 9th, 2025, she picked up Xena from Gruta Veterinary Hospital. There was a procedure that was done with the dog, which may explain why the dog was in a crate at the residence.
Some people might say it's too painful, or they'd rather not interfere with the investigation, but others are pointing to it as a red flag. After all, if she truly believes there was an environmental cause, like carbon monoxide, wouldn't she want to coordinate with investigators in person? That is one of the mysteries fueling speculation across the internet. On top of that, there's a swirl of rumors that Gene Hackman was in the process of revealing some massive secrets related to Jeffrey Epstein. Yes, Jeffrey Epstein, the notorious financier whose name has become synonymous with a ring of high-profile conspiracies.
The spokesperson says they called her back twice to follow up, but did not reach her. Officials believe Betsy died of the hantavirus.
The story goes that Hackman was actually a neighbor of Epstein's at some point, and that he also owned property near some celebrity-owned islands. This rumor claims that Hackman was tired of seeing the Epstein client list suppressed or hidden. According to the same speculation, he was so fed up with powerful people allegedly trying to bury the truth that he was ready to speak out, blow the whistle, or go public with sensitive information. If there is any truth to that rumor, it would introduce the possibility of foul play from well-connected individuals who didn't want any of those secrets out in the open.
Liz, what are some of the other outstanding questions that investigators are exploring?
Yeah, well, investigators say that they have most of the major answers, but they are still considering this an open investigation.
So, is this just another wild internet conspiracy? That's what some critics are calling it. But the fact that we're lacking any clear cause of death here does open the door to more speculation than usual. There was no forced entry in the home, nothing was stolen, and no ransacking. If someone wanted to cover something up, you'd think they'd try to stage a break-in, but apparently that didn't happen. Instead, you have 2 people who died separately in different rooms, plus 1 deceased dog, with 2 other dogs somehow living through whatever happened. Naturally, that leaves everyone scratching their heads. Let's talk specifics about the scene.
A Cloudberry spokesperson saying she was not a patient of the service, but called on the 12th to inquire about what they described as an esoteric treatment, adding that the caller did not display any signs of acute distress.
Authorities say Betsy was found in the bathroom. According to the reports, there was a bottle of pills nearby, some of them scattered on the floor. There was also a space heater that might have tipped over if she collapsed. Apparently, the space heater running in such a small enclosed area could have accelerated the decomposition process. That's why parts of her body were reportedly mummified. Gene was discovered fully clothed in another part of the house, with his sunglasses nearby.
The medical investigator on the case now saying an autopsy of Hackman's 65-year-old wife shows she died of hantavirus, a disease linked to rodents and found in rural areas of the Southwest, including New Mexico.
Police think he may also have fallen, but possibly at a later time than Betsy. One detail that stands out is that the police found the front door slightly ajar, or at least unlocked, but the garage was locked up. That alone might not mean much, except it suggests that if either of them needed help or tried to go outside for some reason, it's unclear why the door wasn't secured in the usual way. Also, how long does it take for two people to be unaccounted for before someone finally checks on them? It turns out it may have been about 10 days.
Authorities telling ABC News exclusively that Hackman's wife called a concierge medical service called Cloudberry.
10 days is a pretty long time to go unnoticed, especially if they had family or close friends who'd normally call or pop in. Leslie says she was close to her dad, but also admits they hadn't spoken in months. That's another contradiction, fueling more speculation. What about that poor dog that didn't make it? If carbon monoxide wasn't the cause, was it dehydration because it was stuck in a kennel with no food or water? That's a heartbreaking possibility. Meanwhile, the other two dogs were found alive.
I can tell you that he was in an advanced state of Alzheimer's, and it's quite possible that he was not aware that she was deceased.
How did that happen if this was an environmental cause that supposedly killed both Gene and Betsy? Investigators might reveal more about that when toxicology reports come back. But for now, it's a massive question mark. If the house had been filled with some kind of gas or toxin, you'd expect all living things inside to suffer the same fate unless certain areas of the house were unaffected for some reason, or one dog happened to be in a room with better ventilation. The official investigation is moving carefully. The local sheriff has called the deaths suspicious enough to require a thorough search of local investigators, or at least withholding judgment until official results were in. Naturally, some watchers think she might be trying to control the story's direction before it escalates into a bigger scandal. Others argue that she might just be in shock and grief, making her cling to a straightforward explanation. Still, if you put any stock in the rumor that Gene Hackman wanted to blow the whistle on the Epstein client list, the carbon monoxide story could look like a deliberate misdirection, as in, maybe she's tossing out a simplistic explanation so that people don't start asking more pointed questions about how or why he passed away.
Janae, this is a major development in the timeline deaths of actor Gene Hackman and his wife, Betsy. Officials initially believed she may have passed away as early as February 11th, but we now know she was alive on the 12th.
This might be especially intriguing if you believe Gene had strong connections to powerful people who might not want him speaking out. That's how big conspiracies take root, right? There's a bit of evidence, a bunch of missing pieces, and a sensational rumor that ties it all together. But let's not forget a simpler explanation. Gene was 95. Betsy may have been around the same age or a bit younger. It's entirely possible that one of them fell ill, the other tried to help, and in the process, they both ended up passing away for purely natural reasons. If Betsy was immobile for too long and Gene tried to go for help but collapsed, remember, at 95, a minor slip can lead to a broken hip or worse. And if no one checked in on them for 10 days, that could explain why their bodies were left undiscovered for so long. The tragedy might be that they simply didn't have enough support or daily check-ins from family or friends.
After being alone for several days after his wife and caregiver, Betsy Arakawa, died first of an unrelated rare virus in their Santa Fe home.
Remember, though, that doesn't fully explain the dog situation. Why would one dog be locked in a closet or a kennel? Did Betsy put the dog there intentionally while cleaning? Or did something else happen? The puzzle just keeps piling up with these odd details. So many people are fixated on the Epstein angle, but we shouldn't lose sight of more mundane possibilities. We'll have to wait for the toxicology and autopsy results to get a more definitive sense of cause of death. Investigators will look for evidence of medication overdoses, infections, or other conditions.
It is so important that we show up for them so that they can continue to show up for their person. I think that there's this common misconception that
might have led to a fatal scenario for both Gene and Betsy. In the meantime, Hollywood icons have come out to pay tribute to Gene Hackman's remarkable career. Clint Eastwood praised Hackman's unparalleled on-screen intensity, and Morgan Freeman recalled working with him on Under Suspicion. Younger fans remember him from classics like The French Connection or comedic hits like The Royal Tenenbaums. That alone reminds us that this entire situation is about a beloved actor whose body of work influenced generations. If he really was on the verge of dropping some massive Epstein-related bombshell, it certainly adds an even more dramatic twist to an already tragic story. Let's talk about how the coroner is trying to pinpoint their exact times of death. Gene apparently had a pacemaker, and it last showed activity around mid-February, possibly about 10 days before they were discovered. That lines up pretty well with the moment they're thought to have died. If Betsy's condition of mummification was more advanced, it suggests she may have passed away first. That might imply Gene was alive for at least some time after she was gone. The question is, why didn't he call for help?
The virus can cause respiratory failure in some cases.
A person can die very quickly, within 24 to 48 hours, roughly speaking, without medical treatment.
Or why couldn't he? Maybe he was injured or disoriented. Still, it's another unusual detail. Then there's the question of why no close friend or family member tried to contact them during that period. Leslie said she was close to him, yet she also admits she hadn't spoken to him in months. Gene's nephew, Tim, hadn't seen him in over a decade, though he stayed in touch with Betsy. Tim even said Betsy was the one taking care of Gene in his later years, which might have been a heavy burden on her if his health was waning. So if Betsy was the caretaker and she fell ill or had an accident, Gene might have been unable to fend for himself. That's a heartbreaking scenario, but it's a common situation for older couples. People sometimes speculate that when one goes, the other isn't far behind. Of course, that doesn't stop the internet from pointing fingers.
Do you believe, given his Alzheimer's status, that Mr. Hackman was able to live on his own and survive for those 7 days?
I'm not aware of what his normal daily functioning capability was. He was in a very poor state of health. He had significant heart disease.
Some are blaming Leslie, others are suspecting a secret assassin paid by wealthy elites to silence Hackman. More pragmatic voices say it might just be a classic case of old age and tragedy. We're all waiting for the official coroner's report and autopsy findings. Until then, we're left with more questions than answers, especially given that carbon monoxide is apparently off the table, according to law enforcement. It's also interesting that Leslie still insists on that explanation without any proof. Maybe she just wants something straightforward to help her process the shock. And hey, people grieve differently. Some people jump in a car and race to the scene, others avoid it altogether. Some go straight to the media, while others want privacy. Maybe Leslie has her reasons. Maybe there are legal issues or estate considerations that complicate things. Still, we can't ignore that it strikes many as odd that she's giving paid interviews about her father's death to tabloids, rather than dealing with it more privately. So here's what's next. We'll be watching the Santa Fe County Sheriff's Office for any official updates. Toxicology results could confirm whether there were any toxins, prescription drugs, or even suspicious substances in either Betsy's or Gene's systems. The investigation will also look at their medical histories to see if something like a chronic condition or a missed medication regimen led to this. Once that's completed, the coroner may be able to say definitively if these deaths were purely natural, accidental, or if there's a criminal angle. If foul play was involved, you can bet this story is going to explode even more. Meanwhile, fans are heartbroken. Gene Hackman was lauded as one of the greatest actors of his generation, delivering iconic performances in everything from serious drama to comedy. And if you look online, countless people are reliving those performances to remember him. Some are marathoning his classic films at home, sharing memories on social media, or just reflecting on the legacy of a man they grew up watching on the big screen. That's the part we should remember. 2 individuals have lost their lives here, and no matter the bizarre speculation, it's still a major loss for the family and for fans worldwide. If the rumors about Epstein are true, it's obviously going to blow this case wide open. But if there's no real connection, it's still a tragic ending for a Hollywood legend. Right now we have more questions than answers. Why did the dog die while the other 2 survived? Why were Gene and Betsy in separate rooms if they passed at the same time or close together? Why is Leslie so adamant about a carbon monoxide leak when investigators have ruled it out? And did Gene really know something about Epstein's client list? Or is that just an internet rumor that latched onto this story? We'll have to wait for official word. As new details surface, I'll be sure to update you here. So, if you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss any future updates on this wild, evolving situation. Until then, stay curious, stay skeptical, and keep the discussion going. Let me know your theories, your speculations, and your takes on the daughter's response. Is it suspicious, or is it just a sign of grief? Thanks for tuning in, everyone. This has been a tough story to report on, given how beloved Gene Hackman was. But it's important we keep asking questions and hoping the investigation shines some light on this tragedy. In the meantime, all we can do is honor the memory of his incredible film career, send our condolences to their loved ones, and keep an eye on any new developments. We'll talk again soon, so stay safe, and I'll catch you next time.